Morning, Rabbi Osai. I'm sort of wavering back and forth here between continuing where we left off in Otzer Hayunim or looking at the Harei Kedem. Take a quick vote. All in favor of Harei Kedem? Okay. So I'll be the third vote, so we'll do some Harei Kedem. So we have the Mishnah at the beginning of Masechet Pesachim. And Tosfos wants to understand what is the Havamina here, that the Mishnah has to go out of its way to emphasize that even a poor person is chayav in Heseiba, Daled Kosos, and Lo Yochal Ad Sheyesev. And Tosfos says the following: Salka Daitach, if not for the Mishnah, I would have thought that Heseibas Ani Lo Choshev Heseiba. That I might have thought that when an ani does Heseiba, that's not considered Heseiba. And the reason for that is the Ein Lo Alma Lehosiv, he doesn't have the facilities. He doesn't have a table, and he can't lean on something over the table. The Ein Zeh Derech Cherus. So it's going to be a major tircha. Okay. Now at this point, we're going to look at the Rambam and how he defines Heseiba. And if you want to look in the Harei Kedem, it's on page Kuf Mem Ches, and it's called Simon Ayin Beis. And in the one that Steve sent out, you'll see it as the second Simon. B'chol dar v'dar, the Rambam says, Perek Zayin Milchas Chametz U'Matzah, Chayev Odom Laharos Es Atzmo Kilu Hu Atzmo Yotza Ato Mishiba Mitzrayim Shenemar Ve'osanu Hotzi Misham. So the Rambam in Halacha Vav of the seventh chapter of Chametz U'Matzah establishes that we have to demonstrate as if tonight we went out from Mitzrayim. Then he goes on and he says in Halacha Zayin, the following Halacha, Lefichach, therefore, because in the light of this chiyuv of laharas atzmo, is kishesoed adam b'layla hazeh. So let's emphasize those words. Kishesoed adam b'layla hazeh. When a person eats a Seudah on this night, again the emphasis on Seudah, tzorech lechol v'lishtos v'umesiv derech cherus. And at this point, if not for the continuation of the Rambam in Halacha Ches, we get the impression, walk away from the Rambam thinking that the mitzvah of Heseiba, the obligation of Heseiba, applies to the entire Seudah. It's only in Halacha Ches that the Rambam is going to whittle it down and qualify it. But if you only have Halacha Zayin, the Rambam says, Kishesoed Adam B'layla Zeh. Tzarech lechol v'lishtos. The Rambam requires a Heseiba when he eats his meal and he drinks whatever he drinks at his meal. And even though, again, the Rambam in Halacha Ches is going to, in a sense, limit this, but the original statement of the Rambam is still very significant. And we'll explain as we go along. So the Rambam continues. And he says the following. This is now Halacha Ches. Okay. I apologize. I'm having trouble here because I'm using it on my phone. Anyway, okay. The Emasai Tzrichim Heseiba. If by any chance anyone knows how to put this up on the screen, maybe only the host can do that. I don't know. So the Rambam says, "The Emasai Tzrichim Heseiba." At what point in the meal do we require Heseiba? B'shas hachilas kizayis matzah Ushtias arba kosos ha'elu. So again, here's the paradox. On the one hand, in Halacha Zayin, the Rambam speaks kishesoid adav alayla zeh, which implies that Heseiba on the night of Pesach is during the Seudah. Leficha kishesoid adav alayla zeh. On the other hand, the Rambam whittles it down and restricts it. Emosai tzrichem Heseiba b'shas achilas kizayis matzah ushtias arba kosos. So how do we put this all together? So Rav Soloveitchik wants to suggest, and perhaps we'll find a little bit of a support for this in the Tosfos that we did yesterday, that the Chiyuv Heseiba of Shas Achilas Matzah and Shas Shtias Arba Kosos is connected to the Seudah. In other words, there are different parts to the Seudah, and there are two parts of the Seudah where Heseiba is an absolute unconditional requirement. You must do Heseiba on these two parts of the Seudah. And those are Achilas Matzah and Shtiyas Daled Kosos. In the language of the Harei Kedem, Chelek mi Chelkei HaSeudah D'Leil HaPesach. Now, you might add a footnote here. Perhaps what the Rav has in mind, I'm just guessing, is that when you're Kovei Seudah, you could be Kovei Seudah on Pas, in this case Matzah, or on Yayin. For example, when we recite Kiddush al Yayin, on Kos Yayin, we're Kovei Seudah al Yayin. So these represent the outstanding markers, if I could call it that, of the Seudah. What delineates the Seudah and the framework of the Seudah, you could eat your knedlach and your roast chicken as part of the Seudah, but what sets up the Seudah itself, the framework of the Seudah, is matzah and daled kosos. And therefore, Rav Soloveitchik wants to understand what would be in the mitzvah of Heseiba with regard to the rest of the Seudah. The obligation of Heseiba is during the eating of the matzah and the drinking of the yayin. But would there be at least a kiyum? In brisk, we always differentiate between the chiyuv and the kiyum. Maybe the chiyuv is during matzah and daled kosos, but there's a kiyum during the entire course of the Seudah. And he writes the following: Hadin shal Heseiba b'kizayis matzah, hu din b'Seudah. It's halach in Seudah. And what that means is that although there's a mitzvah of eating a kizayis matzah, the Torah commands us by erev tochlu matzos, but that achilas matzah has another dimension to it. In addition to being a fulfillment of the mitzvah by erev tochlu matzos, it also sets up a Seudah. And that generates and kicks off the mitzvah of Heseiba, which is a mitzvah and a din midinei Seudah. So the Ikar HaSeudah, and I think this language here supports what I said before, is kizayis matzah v'daled kosos. Again, there's a problem here because I don't know why you need daled kosos. You only need a kizayis matzah. You should only need one revius of yayin to set up the Seudah. But yet, for some reason, every single one of the four kos of yayin are considered Ikar HaSeudah. That's a leap of faith. But Vashel Lachein Svirle La Rambam B'Sof Halacha Ches Digam Shar Hachila. Okay, this is what we spoke about, the knedlach and the roast chicken. Im Hesiv Hareza Meshubach. What does that mean, Hareza Meshubach? What are we going to give him a prize? What are we going to, give him a jack in the box? Well, what's this Heseiba Seudah? We're going to start praising him. We're going to set up a, some sort of parade in the streets. Hey, this guy did Heseiba while he was eating his chicken on the Leil HaSeder. But whether it means in halachic terms, Heseiba Seudah, is that he achieves a kiyum mitzvah. And it means because the mitzvah Heseiba, as we saw in the Rambam, in Halacha Zayin, is be'ikaro, a mitzvah of Seudah, that the Seudah should be eaten b'Heseiba. What's absolutely critical is Heseiba during matzah and adal kosos. But really, as far as the general mitzvah of Heseiba is concerned, it incorporates the entire Seudah. The Ikar Seudah is the Kazayis Matzah and Daled Kosos, so that becomes Likuva. That becomes critical and indispensable. That Heseiba is absolutely essential. But you see clearly that Heseiba applies to the entire Seudah, and therefore Heseiba Seudah, and that's what the Rama meant in Halacha Zayin. Sarach lechol kishasoid adam alayla zit sarach lechol v'lishtos v'umesid. This is a radical revolution in understanding the mitzvah Heseiba, that the mitzvah Heseiba is connected with Seudah. Who ever heard such a thing? And I promise you that you'll never hear it from anybody unless they read the Harei Keder. I don't mean that as an exaggeration. What's the connection between Heseiba and Seudah and Heseiba? You want to learn the laws of Seudah, you learn Orach Chaim. There's an entire section of Simonim in Orach Chaim about the laws of a Seudah. But in Leil HaSeder, there's no special laws of Seudah, and certainly Heseiba, the laws of the Leil HaSeder is not connected to Seudah. Not only that, where do you find the connection between Heseiba and Seudah? But this diuk in the language of the Rambam, which has halachic implications in terms of Heseiba Seudah Hakiyum of Heseiba during the entire course of the Seudah, that is proof positive that the Rambam understood that Heseiba is shaykh to the Seudah. And it means that the Seudah itself is eaten derech cherus. We're going to see in Shulchan Aruch that it says you should bring out the best kalim for your Seudah on Leil HaPesach. Most expensive dishes that you have, because the Seudah itself is a derech cherus. And how do I upgrade the Seudah to derech cherus? Not only by using my beautiful kalim, but also through Heseiba. And the Heseiba l'shvach should be during the entire course of the Seudah. Likuva, it's only during that which is the Ikar Seudah. The Ikar Seudah is the matzah and the daled kosos. So the first nafkamina to this radical breakthrough is that you should be, if possible, you should do Heseiba during the entire Seudah, not just during matzah and daled kosos. But now we go on to a second nafkamina. The Rambam writes, if we fast forward one chapter in Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah to chapter Ches, what happens if a person falls asleep in the middle of the Seudah? Then he wakes up, and the Rambam paskins Eino Chozer V'Yochel. He cannot continue his Seudah. So the commentaries on the Rambam, and that's the Magid Mishnah, Rabbeinu Manoach, they try to explain this Rambam. The Ravid says that he doesn't understand what the Rambam is talking about here. Well, there's no such thing as Shena as far as matzah is concerned. In certain dinim, we have what's called hesech hadas. You're not allowed to lose your focus and get distracted. And if you fall asleep, that constitutes hesech hadas. So, for example, you're not allowed to have hesech hadas during tefillin. And therefore, if you fall asleep while you're wearing your tefillin, that's a problem of hesech hadas. Could be that during the eating of the Korban Pesach, you have to eat the entire kizayis without hesek hadas. But not to allow sleeping during the achil of matzah, says the Ravid, I don't understand this. So quoting the Maharal Prague, time of the Milsa, shetikdu rabbanan shtei kosos lifnei ha-seudah ushtayim liachar ha-seudah. So we have 2 kosos before we eat the matzah, before the Seudah, and 2 after we bench, after the Seudah. Lefichach, miyad mishe hifsik uvenisnamnem lo yochal od tavi hefsek v'tzorech l'shtei kosas achronos miyad achar Seudah. He says the following: we should not be splitting the Seudah in half by creating a hesek hadas through sleeping, and basically the entire Seudah is enveloped by 2 kosos and another 2 kosos. So the first 2 kosos before the Seudah and the last 2 kosos after the Seudah connect to the Seudah and create a framework of Dalid kosos related to a Seudah. But if, on the other hand, he falls asleep, if he's going to continue eating when he wakes up, then he had 1 Seudah before he fell asleep and another Seudah after he fell asleep. So the 2 kosos that he drank at the beginning of the Seder are connected to the first Seudah and not to the second Seudah. V'lo kach tiknu chachamim shetzarech lios shtei kosos lifnei ha-Seudah shtayim lachreah. We want 2 kosos before the Seudah, 2 after the Seudah, and the Seudah is now enveloped by 4 kosos. But if there's a hesek hadas, then you split the Seudah into 2, such that now the last 2 kosos will relate to the second Seudah, and the first 2 kosos to the first Seudah, and that's not the way the Chacham made the takana. The takana was that the Seudah should connect the first 2 kosos and the second 2 kosos into one entity of a Seudah that's enveloped by 4 kosos. Does anybody have any questions here? I mean, I'm expecting some feedback here. You know, the problem here is that I don't hear you, and we're saying something really way out here. The Rambam is saying if you fall asleep in the middle of Seudah on Leila Pesach, you should not continue eating when you wake up. You should decide that you've completed the Seudah without eating anymore. Bench, and then go on to the next 2 kosos of yayin. Hello, anybody home? I mean, you should be jumping out of your seats here. I mean, this is like the wildest idea I've ever heard in my life about the Seder.
Yeah, because then you don't have 4 kosot in one Seder.
In one Seudah.
In one Seudah. You have 2 Sudot and each one having only 2 kosot.
Exactly. And the whole structure of the Dalid Kosos is to surround the Seudah. It's almost like you have a hub in a wheel with the spokes that connect everything to the hub. The hub connects everything. The hub is the Seudah, and it connects to the first 2 kosos and to the last 2 kosos. But if you fall asleep in the middle of your Seudah, that ends your Seudah because that's called Hesek Hadas. And therefore the Rambam says that you're going to require to bench immediately when you wake up. You can't continue your Seudah. Because if you do so, then you're starting a new Seudah. So you'll have the Shtei Kosos Rishonos connected to the first Seudah, and the Shtei Kosos Achronos connected to the second Seudah, and that's not the Kiyum HaMitzvah. But again, we're seeing now the connection and the significance in the role of Seudah. It's not coincidental that the Rambam A tells you that the Seudah requires Heseiba, and B, that the Rambam tells you that Hareza Meshubach, if he does Heseiba during the entire course of the Seudah. And now number 3, we're adding a third halacha that if he falls asleep in the middle of the Seudah, he's got to complete the Seudah, then bench and drink the other 2 kossos.
The Afikomen's not part of the Seudah?
I don't think so. I think the Afikomen is a separate din of ala sova zecher lekorban Pesach. So we don't want to integrate the korban Pesach into the Seudah itself. That's a separate mitzvah. Just going to get myself a little water to drink, sorry. Okay. Now it's very interesting. We asked the following question: Balayla, b'chalilos, anu ochlim bein mesubin, bein yoshim bein mesubin. Balayla zeh mesubin, or kulana mesubin, whatever the gears is. The Rav wants to know what exactly is the essence of that question about Heseiba, right? Alayla zeh mesubin. We've already asked the question about the matzah. Matzah, right? Now we require Heseiba during matzah, right? As we've discussed numerous times. So why give it another question about Heseiba if we've already asked about matzah? Meaning, included in matzah, there's a detail, a halachic requirement to eat the matzah b'Heseiba. But that's part of the achilas matzah. You've already asked the question about matzah. Why are you asking a question about Heseiba? And the implication is that there's something in Heseiba beyond matzah. He says the following: V'hine b'meshe shoalim manishtana al Heseiba yesh la'ayin. Maya she'ela. Why are you asking about Heseiba? We're asking a shaila on the shaila, kasha on the kasha. Heseiba udin b'mitzvahs matzah ushtias daled kosos. In other words, Heseiba is not a separate mitzvah. V'kol hashana ein mitzvahs matzah ushtias daled kosos v'lachein leka Heseiba. He's saying the following: there's such a simple answer to the question of balayla hazeh mesubin. Why is this night different than any other night? Well, the answer is because there's no other night in which we eat matzah and drink daled kosos. So we're doing Heseiba because of the matzah and the daled kosos. So you have a kasha. Why don't we do Heseiba the whole year round? That's a crazy kasha. Pardon the expression, that's an idiosyncratic question. It's very funny. You can envision at Rav Soloveitchik's Seder table, his grandchild gets up and says, Zayda, I don't understand. Why on this night are we doing Heseiba? So the Zayda says, that's a stupid question. Why do you ask such a question? On this night, we're eating matzah and we're drinking daled kosos. And that's why there's Heseiba. What's it got to do with any other night of the year? Is there another night of the year where we're required to eat matzah and drink dalit kosos? Part of the mitzvah of matzah and dalit kosos is Heseiba. And only on this night do we have a mitzvah of dalit kosos and Heseiba. And you're asking me a dumb question about why on this night we have Heseiba, not on any other night? It's a dumb question. You see, the fear kashas in the Rav is not just it's not just child's questions. This is part of the Nusach Haggadah. It goes back to the time of the Mishnah. The Mishnah itself has Manishtana. Okay, I don't know why there's no question about Dalit Kosas. That I don't know. I mean, tonight we're doing a Heseiba when we're eating matzah, we're drinking Dalit Kosas. No. According to the way we explained the Rambam, that Heseiba is a din in Seudah, now we understand the kasha. Wait a minute. We have a Seudah every night of the year. And if the Seudah generates Heseiba, why on this night of the year does the Seudah generate Heseiba? We eat a Seudah every night of the year. Harigam kol hashana ochlim Seudah. V'yein ochlim also Heseiba. We don't require Heseiba for every Seudah. Rak b'leil Pesach yesh mitzvah lechov v'lishtos derech cherus. There's something unique about Leila Pesach, that the Seudah on Leila Pesach is a mitzvah of achila derech cherus. The Seudah itself has to be eaten derech cherus. And that's what we're trying to teach the child. Tonight is the night of cherus, and therefore our Seudah tonight is a Seudah of cherus. It's not like the Seudah of yesterday or tomorrow. It's the Seudah of derech cherus. And the Seudah derech cherus requires Heseiba. And that's Manishtana, Seudah zu mikol ha'seudos. And now the Rav comes up with I would call it the Makav Patish here. So again, let's just summarize. Number one, if Dalit Kosas is halacha in Seudah, then we can have a key. I'm sorry, what did I just say? What I meant to say is if Heseiba is halacha in Seudah, then we can have a requirement, or at least a kiyum of Heseiba during the entire course of the Seudah. Number two, if somebody falls asleep in the Seudah, and therefore he sets up, when he wakes up, a new Seudah, that's a problem, because we need a Seudah that's embellished and encompassed by 4 kosas, 2 and 2. Nafkamina number 3 is why we ask a question, B'alayla hazeh kulanu mesubim, which means Manishtana Seudah zu mikol ha'seudos. Now he has a 4th implication. Lefiza nira poshet ledina lemisha ein lo matzah. A man doesn't have matzah, and he can't do a Heseiba for sure during matzah because he doesn't have access to matzah. Can he be Mekayim the mitzvah Heseiba with Dalit Kosos? And he says no. Why? Because Dalit Kosos has to be part of the Seudah. That's the nature of the takon of Dalit Kosos. And if he doesn't have matzah, he doesn't have a Seudah. Again, he's not entertaining my possibility that you could be Koveh Seudah al Yayin, that he doesn't have that. So you have to know about Kiddush al Yayin. In any event, if Elo Seudah, Arei Mufka, he's excluded Me'akiyim Shel Dalit Kosos. Ulam Lumatzeh, Im elo matzah lishma, avol yesh biyado matzah shelo lishma, hu chayev dalit kosas. Gam be'Heseiba b'shas achilas matzah dikar sudos kayemes gam be'matzah shenim shtameres aftalo yotzi yedei chovas matzah. Wow, this is wild. we have two types of matzahs. I mean, we're going to have to get into this sugya later on. We're not ready for it now. But there's matzahs which are called shmura matzahs, otherwise known as matzahs mitzvah. The Torah says u'shmartem es hamatzos, and then there are matzahs pshutos. So you can eat matzos pshutos on Leil HaPesach, but you will not fulfill the mitzvah of matzah. But to be Kovei Seudah, you don't need matzah's mitzvah, says Rav Soloveitchik. All you need is matzah, even pshuta. And now, if he doesn't have access to matzah shmura, but he has access to matzah's pshutos, then he could set up a Seudah with matzah's pshutos. That's the best he can do. He doesn't have matzah shmura. He cannot fulfill the mitzvah of achilas matzah, but he will be able to be kovei Seudah so that now he's got daled kosos, the first two and the last two, which, as we said, are connected to the Seudah. Not only that, he will be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Heseiba at the time that he eats matzah pshuta. That's pretty wild. I mean, I would have said that Heseiba is part of the mitzvah of matzah, or at least it was attached to the mitzvah of matzah. And when you're fulfilling the mitzvah of matzah, at that point, you can fulfill your chiyuv of Heseiba. Now we're splitting it. We're saying that Heseiba and matzah is split from the mitzvah of matzah. You're eating matzahs that don't lend themselves to the mitzvah of matzah, but they set up a Seudah, and therefore the Heseiba is connected to the matzah of Seudah. And then you can drink the daled kosos as well. Wow. Now he has another Rambam, which is going to be a little bit of a problem. Perek Ches Halacha Yud, Yesh lo ligmar sahalel, bechol makom sheyirtza, afal pisha eno makom seudah. Okay, we'll get back to this in a minute. Uberayvin sham hisig al zeh. Now we're moving on to page Kuf Mem Tes. Omar Avram, Ein adas mikabeles ken. Lefisha enkan shame. And what was the next word here? Lefisha enkan. Not sure what the word shame is doing here. Lefisha enkan shame li arba kosos im eno b'mokom echad. Anybody have any idea what the word shame means here? From Eina das mekabelos came lefisha enkan shame li arba kosos im eno b'mokom echad. So again, I don't know what the word shame means, but just in general, what the Ravid is bothered by is that there's a fourth kos of yayin, of the daled kosos, which is going to be attached to Hallel. And the fourth kos, no less than the three kosos, belong to one makom. They all four have to be drunk in the same place. Now, he got up when he was ready for Hallel, and he went to a different place. And that's not where he's eating his meal. And he's reciting Hallel. And the Rambam says that that's okay. Says the Ravid, but wait a minute, what about the four kosos? He's got to drink all four kosos. and they all have to be drunk in the same makom, which is the makom Seudah. Now he's getting up from his Seudah. He's changing his place to a different makom, and now he's going to recite Hallel and drink the fourth kos. So we understand the Ravid, because the Ravid wants 4 kosos that are connected to what? To the Seudah. So the 4 kosos are like considered an integral part of the Seudah. And therefore you need that all 4 kosos to be drunk in one makom Seudah. And now he's picking himself up for Hallel to a different makom. It's not his makom Seudah, and he's going to recite Hallel and drink the 4th kos. So he's missing the kiyum of Daled kosos, which have to be fulfilled together with the Seudah. And they all require that same makom Seudah. But according to the Rambam, how could it be that he's going to drink the 4th kos shelo b'makom Seudah? So perhaps he's going to have to recite the Hallel, finish the Hallel, and go back to the original makom Seudah where he drank the first 3 kosos, and there he's going to drink the 4th kos. I mean, the Rambam doesn't say that. Oh, now I'm getting excited. Remember, I made a comment at the beginning that perhaps this could connect to Tosfos about the Iker Seudah al Matzah, and that's why you require Heseiba even after you finished Magid, right? The Gemara objects to Daled Kosos if you require Heseiba in the last 2 kosos because you've already recited the Haggadah, so you finish with the Magid and Sipur. So Tosfos says, let's raise the same question with regard to matzah, because he only eats the matzah after he finishes the Daled kosos. The ayin b'Tosfos Heseiba Pesachim b'dibra maschil may dahava hava shekosav shematzah poshut shetzarich Heseiba, even though he already finished his recitation of the Haggadah, kishani matzah shehi ikar haseudah yoser miyayin. Mashma b'Tosfos filei dvemes ikar chovas Heseiba hu halacha b'Seudah. Tosfos, like the Rambam, attaches Heseiba to the Seudah. Lachain, and therefore matzah is bevadai chayeves b'Heseiba. In and of itself, the matzah, which is the catalyst or the agent that sets up the Seudah, certainly requires Heseiba, because the din of Heseiba was Heseiba the Seudah. So the matzah, which is Iker Seudah and sets up the Seudah, certainly requires Heseiba. Ela to be komakom svilei Tosfos the Daled kosos atzman eino chelek mi haseudah. In other words, why do we object in that Mandiyomar to Heseiba during the second set of Daled kosos, the last 2 kosos? Because my dava hava, we've already fulfilled the mitzvah of Sipur. That objection doesn't apply to matzah because matzah is the Iker Seudah. Well, why not remove the objection to Heseiba during the last 2 kosos? Because the 2 kosos are the Iker Seudah. Apparently, they're not considered Iker Seudah. Shom Gemara Heseiba Daled could be right, or the second pair. The imatam shetzorch lahasiv ki adaled kosem chelik michalke asuda ein makom lechalik bazeh. You can't differentiate between matzah which is Ikar Seudah, in the last two kosos, which according to that man, the don't require a say because of my dava hava, and it's not considered Ikar Seudah. Acharama be'emes hishmit laiboy zu v'sasam shedin asebu b'chol daled kosos. The Rambam doesn't even bother entering into this issue. Well, how can you do a save on the last two kosos when you've already fulfilled the mitzvah of Haggadah? Because the Rambam holds that the save of the last two kosos, like the save of the first two kosos, it's all one unit of seudas to set up a seudas. They're cheres by doing a save of the first and the last two kosos. So there's really no room in the framework of the Rambam sheet of Seudah to differentiate between the first two and the last two kosos. Okay. All right. Now we move on to the end of Halacha Ches. V'shara chilosu shtiyosum heisav areizim mishruch elavein utzorich. So shara chiloso ushtiyoso, as far as Heseiba, it's not critical. Whereas in Daled Kosos and Kizais Matzah, Heseiba is critical. And he says that this Lachor is against the Brisker Rav, that's his uncle. But again, I don't know exactly what the Brisker Rav says. There may be a copy of the Brisker Rav here somewhere, but I'm not sure. Don't know. V'nira mishum sha'aseba hu t'nai b'kiyum ha'seudah b'leil Pesach. V'chiyuv ha'seudah lechol matzah v'lishtos daled kosos. Right, so the reason why Heseiba is going to be likuva, absolutely critical and indispensable, is because that's how you fulfill the Seudah. The Seudah has to be eaten with matzah and daled kosos b'Heseiba. And he suggests again that if you're going to repeat the achila of matzah because you omitted Heseiba on the first round, l'chor you don't have to eat matzah's mitzvah because that you fulfilled already, and you can take a matzah pshuta, which is not a matzah shmura, because all you need is to set up the seudah as a seudas cheres, which you can do even with matzah pshuta. Now, Rav Shurkin, who's the author of Hare Kedem, adds his own comment here, which you'll see in brackets. Achshamati mipi Agon Rabbi David Soloveitchik Shlita shedas haramam shekosavim lav Eino tzorich sobim al tchilas halacha shev'shas achilus kizayis machlis tzorich haseiba v'im lav shelo hesiv b'achilus v'mizov eino tzorich lachsavucha. Wow. So we're not sure if the Rambam requires a repeat performance of matzah and daled kosos, an event that he omitted Heseiba, because it's possible to interpret the Rambam that when it says v'im lav, meaning if he didn't do Heseiba, eino tzarich, as if to say he's yotzei b'diavad even without Heseiba, That goes back to the beginning of the halacha of achilas matzah and shtiyas daled kosos that require a seiba, and the Rambam is saying that im lo hesiv, if he didn't do a seiba, is einot tsar. Now, is there any logic to recline while he's reading the Haggadah? Do you remember we discussed this? I think we had it in the Otzer Yunim, if anybody recalls that. That maybe, no. We had in the Amudei Hod that perhaps there was a Havamina that during the Haggadah itself he should be Mesiv. He says that since the Haggadah is not a Seudah, it's just a recitation, therefore it doesn't require Heseiba. Rak b'achilu shtia, yesh makom laharbos b'Heseiba. So there's room for Heseiba during Achil and Sh'sia, like we said before, when he eats his roast chicken, but not while he's reciting the Haggadah. Now he quotes the Avudraham. What about Heseiba when he eats the yerek of Tibul Rishon? I think, if I'm not mistaken, our minhag is that we do Heseiba during Karpas, no? Anybody have a Haggadah? All right, I'm not going to look for Haggadah now. Upasak de boy Heseiba, l'chor tzarch bir, ha-Karpas einu shayach klal le'asuda, ha-yesh la'im v'bach, because of the bir at-shuva Litinokos ala she'elo dematbilin pam shtei pamim hatshuva litinokos that tibul kodem asudu derech cherus kiderech b'nei chorin shematbilim kodem asuda lahamshich tavas amach the kevin shekei nimsa shekam parpas harbi chelik men asuda v'shap b'shayapus. I say, wow. Salvation is just going and going and going. It's like unbelievable. Now he's saying that Heseiba during the first tibul, which we call Karpas, is meaningful as established by the Avudraham because it's part of the Seudah. The tibul is part of the Seudah. Because that's how they used, in the old days, that's how you used to start the Seudah. The first thing they did was dips. Even today, that's what we do. We do dips. Just we usually do the dips after we wash on a pot, on pots. But they used to take out the dips even before the meal. There's a famous fish restaurant here. But I mean, there are probably millions that fits this, but I just know that restaurant. It's called Shirat Hayam. Anybody eat there? No. Anyway, so the first thing they give you when you sit down is they give you these dips. So you start the meal with karpas, which is dipped in whatever it's dipped in, and that's part of the Seudah. And if it's part of the Seudah, it requires Heseiba, or at least it's meaningful to do Heseiba. Boy, this is full of chidushim today. Now, in order to guarantee that the Ani B'Yisrael will have Dalit Kosos, we dip into the community chest, which is called a soup kitchen Tamchui, and we take money from the Tamchui for the mitzvah of Dalit Kosos, which we don't find with regard to any other mitzvah. Let's say, for example, he's so poor he can't buy a pair of tefillin. We're not going to dip into the Tamchui and take that money away when it's needed for food in order for him to buy a pair of tefillin. So why is it different when it comes to Dalit Kosos? And the answer is that the Dalit Kosos is part of the Chovas Seudah. And we have to supply the ani with all tzarchei seudah, whatever he needs for the Seudah. Right? We're going to buy him a roast chicken. And now we have to buy him daled kosos because that's also part of the Seudah. It's a major part of the Seudah. And on Shabbos, we give him Gimel Sudos. Okay, Lamaisa, maybe we don't give him Gimel Sudos because I say Shabbat Chachol, whatever it is. L'chein hu adin hacha, nosim lo kol tzarchei hasuda, derech cherus, min hatamchui. And the question is, would we give him, for example, min hatamchui for Ner Chanukah? The answer is no, because Ner Chanukah is not part of a Seudah. And Tamchui is earmarked for the Seudah. But he suggests that maybe what's going to happen is if the Ani doesn't have money for Ner Chanukah, then he won't have money to buy food. In other words, the limited amount of funds that he owns, he needs to buy food. So maybe we should give him a tamchui for Ner Chanukah. That's the end of Simon Ayin Beis. Okay, then. So we'll take a break now.